And I realized that, really the thing that was most important to me was my boys, my wife. But there's a lot of people that love what they're doing, right? Like not everybody wants to escape the rat race, but if we can help people continue to do what they love and help build a little bit of stack on the backside to where maybe they can peel back a little bit, but still enjoy it. That's a lane that I don't think it's talked about enough either, is that investing doesn't just have to be to escape something. Investing can be something that also can help you gain more of what you already have or more time or whatever else you love doing.
Do you want financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom? Want to live large and live free? Then come with me.
Release.
If you're scared, walk away, 'cause there's no need to feel ashamed. Yeah, we all feel the same. Where's your passion? Where's your fighting?
All right, now. The whole road is looking on. I'm going over. Jumper away. Speed 725. Showing Felix at a stable descent. And Felix is back to it safely, the new world record holder.
Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Hack Radio. I'm your host, Bryce Robertson. And today, my friends, we have an awesome and exciting guest, Ben Nelson from Wild Oak Capital. Ben Nelson cut his teeth producing large-scale action sports events around the world, and his experience includes multiple world record credits. He now focuses his skill set and energy within the multifamily real estate space, and his passion about helping as many other people reach their financial freedom and time freedom as soon as possible by meeting them where they are on their journey. Ben, welcome to Freedom Hack Radio.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate being here.
So Ben, a place I always love to start, mate. What's got you feeling the most gratitude today?
Man, how much time do you have, Bryce? I'm a lucky man. I grew up in Colorado. I get to experience outside. I'm capable physically, mentally, and emotionally being outside, but I think the biggest thing is time with my family. We were just talking about it offline, being able to spend outside time with my boys and be able to spend time with other people, helping them gain that time as well.
Yeah, and you were saying you just had some pretty epic snowboarding recently with your young fellas.
You bet. Yeah, no, I've got two little boys, 8 and 9, and they're in that magic sweet spot where they're physically capable and they're starting to hang and we can ski together, and they still think dad's cool. They're not too cool to not hang out with me. So I'm enjoying that quite a bit.
Man, the thing, like when I started investing back in 2015, the thing back then, everyone was talking about financial freedom, and a lot of people still are talking about financial freedom, but the time freedom piece, it's just like everybody's talking about it now. It's like this whole waking up that's happening on the planet right now where people are like, wait up, this whole like waking up at 5:30, going to the grind until you die. I don't think we're meant to live like that. And so many people are waking up and realizing how special it is to be able to spend time with our family and friends and do the things we want to do. It's so important today. And I know that's a very core focus of what you guys are doing as well.
Very much. Well, and I think a lot of it too is you talk a lot of this. We spoke in the beginning about meeting people where they are. So I was fortunate to be in an industry that I loved just wholeheartedly. I loved what we were doing. I loved the projects. I loved the difficulty and the complexity. But it came to a point where that was taking over all of my time away from my family. You know, I made a joke that I was always building other things for other people, other places. And I realized that, really the thing that was most important to me was my boys, my wife. But there's a lot of people that love what they're doing, right? Like not everybody wants to escape the rat race, but if we can help people continue to do what they love and help build a little bit of stack on the backside to where maybe they can peel back a little bit, still enjoy it. That's a lane that I don't think it's talked about enough either, is that investing doesn't just have to be to escape something. Investing can be something that also can help you gain more of what you already have or more time or whatever else it is you love doing.
I love that. That's a really unique thing about you and your perspective of meeting people where they are. Can you give a couple of examples of like meeting people where they are?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about that, is no investor is the same, in my opinion, right? Like there's a lot of people when they come into this space. Number one, I personally think not nearly enough people understand or even know about this space. Or, if you hear about specifically the real estate syndication, there's a lot of people who just have a misconception or don't necessarily understand what that is. The fact that we're pooling people's money together to buy larger assets and that people gain actual ownership of a piece of that asset is incredibly powerful. And when we start talking to people about what that means and how that works, it's huge. So some people may, for that example I just gave, there's some producers that I love and they're working their faces off. They choose to not have families. They want to just be a part of this and they love what they're doing. So what we do is we say, hey, cool, we'll work with you to be an LP. We'll do all the hard work. We'll do all the lifting. You can invest with us and we'll continue to help you grow your net worth. We'll continue to help you with tax benefits, all the things that come along with it. There's also people that are very interested. I'm a much more hands-on guy. I just learn by doing. And so I would want to be a part of like, how does it work on the backside? How does that work? So we have, we've built modules, we have coaching, we're now starting this event series to just show people and match people with other really experienced folks who've come before them. We didn't invent this. There's a lot of people that showed us the way here also. So we're trying to match people, whether it be with us or with other people, to meet them on their journey. And there's people who are, really experienced, know exactly what they want, know exactly what their niche is. And we say, hey, either yep, we have that for you and we can work with you there, or that's not us, but we have some very good friends that are doing that. Right. So we're in the value add space. Mobile home parks, for example, somebody comes to us to say, I'm really interested in mobile home parks. I really understand it. I get it. I really want to be there. I say, great, that's not our lane. But let me introduce you to Bryce because I know him. I understand what he's doing. I really trust him to do that. So for us, it's more about when we say meet people where they are, is having the conversation with them about who they are, where they are in their journey. It's in the beginning, the middle, the end, and what your goals are for your life and for your time, for your family. And then we try to do a best job to match you with what that is, whether it be with us or somebody else.
You mentioned trust just then. And I think that if I'm an investor and I'm looking to invest my money with somebody, I definitely want to trust the person who's going to be managing my money. And I say to my investors all the time that I think that we should put more, probably significantly more than 50% of our decision-making of whether we're going to join a certain investment, if we're investing passively, in the person who's actually going to be managing our money and managing the investment versus the actual investment itself. Because someone who's really good at what they can do can take a pretty average investment and make it perform really well, or they could actually take an excellent investment and make it perform pretty poorly if they're actually not good at what they do. So I think trust is like a huge part. And when I look at you and I look at your life and I look at the things that you've done, I personally think that what you're doing right now is so dramatically less complicated and less complex to the capacity of things that you've actually handled in the past, that I want to take an opportunity right now to kind of like wind back the clock and talk about some of these projects that you used to work on when you're basically coordinating the events for world records. So can you explain what it was that you spent a lot of your previous life doing?
Sure. Yeah. So we found ourselves in a niche, and by we, I mean the people that I work with. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Just like in real estate, you need a team, you need people around you that are doing a great job. But we cultivated this ability to pull off things in a niche that was difficult, right? Really unique, really interesting things. So there's a couple examples of that, but the one that I think is the most interesting is racing off-road desert trucks, so short course desert trucks on snow in Maine. This one was not necessarily the world record, but just never been done before. And so we were approached by some of our friends at Red Bull, and a good buddy of mine, Pete Breakerhoff, had this idea and said, hey, we really have this idea. We think this could be really interesting to just take something that doesn't exist in this atmosphere and this environment and see what happens. So over the course of a year, and again, multiple people involved, but we developed this plan to put these short course trucks on snow and build jumps and build an over under and what that would actually take, redesigning some of these aspects of it. And so that led us into a lot of other things, including some of these world records. We were able to be a part of the ground team that dropped Felix Baumgartner from near space as part of the Stratos project. We worked with Nitro Circus hand in hand when they were doing the Nitro Circus World Games, specifically the competition piece. And, we got to do some fun stuff there too. And working with people like, Travis Pastrana had this idea. He wanted to build the first over under, the over under jumps were pretty, prolific at that time. So it's actually a car going over, another car jumping, and another car going through a tunnel all simultaneously, all at once. And just the ability to do some of those things. And to your point, what that takes, a lot of people see that, or, you show up, you buy your ticket and you go away. They've probably been here for a couple of days. Most of those take years in the making to make that happen. You start talking about Stratos. We picked it up at an iteration that was even down the line. There were people before us. They even looked at a different venue. People see that maybe there was one jump and jumped out of space and it was fine. We lived in Roswell off and on for over a year, just in the project, because there's, different iterations and different tests and testing the capsule and all these different things and building out the ground space for everything to happen there. So what we do is we come in, we sit with a client, go through the project, build the budget, build the time frame, and see if it's going to work. And a lot of times when you talk about these world records, it's even more intense in the sense that people approach us and say, hey, we want to break a world record. And so we'll just use an example, like longest distance for a motorcycle. They say, cool, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to achieve it? It's like, oh, okay, it's a marketing employee, great. And they say, what's your budget and what's your timeline? And more often than not, people are like, we want to get this done in 3 months. We're like, you're out, because it takes an immense volume of training, intense volume of budget. Because what we'll do is the same thing in business, same thing as in multifamily, anything we're talking about, we'll take that athlete, even if they're incredibly talented, and we'll start jumping small and just repetition of getting used to what this feels like in bike. And we'll jump farther and we'll jump farther. And then we get to a place where we're training at a distance, and then we get into that real thing. So you're talking about weeks, months, sometimes years before you're getting into the actual thing. So that's in a nutshell, sort of how we got into it and how the world records go. And I could talk for a long time about even more than that.
Let's actually take a little bit of like a sidetrack down there and we'll bring it back to the investment world. Sure. For example, Felix Baumgartner, and you're referring to him creating the world record of the highest skydive and basically going into, was it the stratosphere? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, the project was Stratos, but it was, the upper atmosphere. I can talk about that project. And there's 7 world records that were broken there. Some of them stand, some of them don't. But the idea was that he was going to do the world's highest skydive. And it's really interesting in the sense that he was actually following in the footsteps and breaking a world record of a former military officer. His name was Joe. Incredible dude. And I'd highly encourage people to go back and take a look at the history of that, because some people that laid the groundwork there were men. Mm-hmm. They did this, we had technology, we have a lot of technology. He was essentially jumping out of like a canvas sack with, what they were figuring out to be spacesuits, which was leather and duct tape, essentially.
With no cameras and no like support crews and all this stuff, right?
Oh yeah. No, it was but the cool thing is that Joe was a part of the entire process, and Joe was the only person allowed to speak to Felix in his ear as he was going through the capsule. So what that took for us. Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, that's just like a big responsibility right there. I mean, it's huge. He's the only one that's allowed to like get in his head in that moment.
He's also the only one in the entire world that knows what he's thinking at that time, or as close to it as possible. He's the only other person that's done that and jumped out of a balloon, out of a capsule attached to a balloon, I should say, at that space and looked down. There's a ton of risk that's involved, right? Like we talk about this, and I think it's the same. We can get back to investing, but really what my biggest job was to mitigate risk for the project. And how do we look at the best possible way to get there? And how do we build our systems and our processes and our people in such a way that we're doing this in the best possible way we can, but also knowing that things are going to go wrong, right? And I think that we talked about this personally offline, is that whether it's investing or whether it's project management in this space, you build your best possible plan, but then you also build the space for something to go wrong. And that's where you talk about trust, right? Picking the person or the team that can go into a space with plan A, but also can service plan B, plan C, plan D for the better and for the worse. And understand that if you have the ability, like the best possible plan is the ability to think on your feet once you got past that.
Yeah, man. I mean, there must just be so many moving pieces with all of it. I mean, I'm assuming you have to have like engineers in place, and then there's like all of the tech side of things, then there's the camera crews, and then people need to eat too, and you guys are in Roswell, and like not much in Roswell, so then you got to bring like all of the you gotta take care of the people in Roswell, and like dude, I mean, how many people does it take to pull together a project like this?
I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, and again, it takes a team. We were the ground support crew, but there's an entire group of engineers. There's a man named Art, who helped develop all of the space components to this, developing the capsules. There's another entire crew on the ground for cameras, and not just for there. There's actually a specifically built camera rig that has essentially a telescope to be able to track Felix from the point of exit all the way down to the ground. Yes, all the way down to people. You know, we affectionately called a lot of our guys, the operations team on the ground, space janitors, because there's people that still have to. You have to sweep, you have to clean, you have to make sure the cars are parked right, you have to make sure people are fed. You know, we do all of the work there from the ground all the way up, and you're making sure that it syncs, right? And everybody has to work together.
So when we're managing properties, when we're managing an investment, some things do go wrong. And I want to fully bring this back to investing in a little bit, but I want to just kind of stick on this for a little bit longer. When you were managing this project with Felix Baumgartner, what kind of things did go wrong throughout that process? Maybe even some of the things leading up to training, like through training, and then did anything like actually happen on the day of as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, the training things are really interesting. The training component of that, especially the time that they spent with Felix, there's a very specific team that they trained and built the suit. There's another skydiver named Luke Aiken who worked specifically with Felix, who's incredibly talented, and literally would jump out in that spacesuit and try to learn how to, get out of control and get himself back in control. And so it was a true team effort. But to your point, as we're building these things up, you're learning things over time. And that's why they did so many jumps. And that's why we build these things up. So we started with a crew, I think there were probably 40 or 50 people on the ground when it started. And by the end, we were at hundreds by the time you had crews and everybody else in there. But we learned a bunch. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens that I can't talk about, but there's one pretty interesting story that happened. We have to be really agile, but sometimes the easiest thing is the best thing. So on the day of the actual launch, we actually had to scrub the first day. And so the second day that when we actually unrolled the balloon and we were going for it, all of a sudden we have this blip in communications, and we're seeing a breakdown in communication, and we pick back up, and seeing breakdown in communication and pick back up. And there's Air Force officials with us, and they make a call and say, hey, we're seeing an anomaly. We're seeing, a pretty regular blip on our communications, and it's completely cutting us out, which would make us scrub. And as I understand it, because I wasn't on the phone, the answer was, yes, we see it too. We understand what that is. We know what it is, and no, it's not going to turn off, and no, we're not going to tell you what it is. So we're just racking our brains because we don't know how long it's going to happen. We've brought all these things out. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars invested in this thing happening. So quite literally, I send my little brother Matt out to every store in Roswell, New Mexico, and surrounding areas as quickly as we could. And we sent a bunch of people out. We got every inch of aluminum foil we could find, and we take a fence panel that we had, an extra fence panel, and we just wrap this with tin foil and wrap it with scrim and put it on the front of a big forklift, and we drive it out and point and basically block it in the direction that this signal is coming from. And no joke, like I didn't think it was going to work, but it worked well enough.
That we use in our kitchen, like that we would debate in the oven, just like wrapping up the forklift with that.
Yeah, just a fence panel. It's like a big wall of foil, and then wrap that to where and a piece of scrim to make it look not foily and make it look prettier. And yeah, it worked well enough to get everything off the ground.
That's some MacGyver stuff there, dude.
There's a lot of those. You'd be surprised how much of that happens on the back end of a major production, for sure.
That's wild. So yeah, man, when I'm thinking about all of these kinds of complexities, and then, fast forward, you're involved in the multifamily space. And I think about like managing people's money and the things that are involved with multifamily properties. it's kind of like child's play, really, like what you're doing these days compared to like the complexity there. Obviously, it's very important. It's very important to manage people's monies. But you had like literally like people's lives on stake back then. So how do you bring all of this into the investment world? I mean, you were like the risk guy. How do you bring like this risk adjustment into like the investing world?
I think it's a very similar mentality in the sense that you're right. You know, we've been in meetings and for the most part, toward the end of the career, almost every single project started with us gathering the important people in a room and saying, hey, this is what happened if somebody dies. This is what happened if something goes wrong. This is what happens if we have to quit. And really understanding how you communicate well with each other and why that communication is so important. So I don't think it's a lot different in the sense that, yes, you know, knock on wood, hopefully if we do something wrong, nobody's going to die. But we have people's livelihoods in our hands. We have the well-being of some people in our hands. For the most part, you know, people that are investing with us, they know what they're getting into. That's part of the game. But the communication piece, the preparedness piece, and to me, the understanding that no matter what we do, the plan's going to change. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. I actually keep all the notebooks from all the projects that I produce, and even some of the small ones that I still do for fun, because it's always really interesting to see where we thought we were going to be and where we ended up, right? And so a lot of this, in the sense of investing, I think a lot of people get really excited about closing the deal, right? Like, oh, we're closed, we're under contract, everything's great, like, you know, we're here. But that's just the start. To me, like, that's where we think we're starting. This, 3 to 5 years down, the exit, like, that's race day, right? Like, that's where we actually get that glory. And the in between is how we have to adjust it. So in my brain, the risk piece is part of it. And we look and see, you know, contractually, are we aligned? Is what can go wrong in the space? Or, you know, we primarily are in the Southeast. So for example, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, tornadoes can be a thing. Flooding can certainly be a thing. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing ice storms. But it's just also about, hey, you know, what else is going on the property? What else is going on in the neighborhoods? What else is going on in the region? And making sure that we're aligning with the right people. To me, it's asking the right questions too, and just being prepared and asking, you know, we interview property management. What happens when something goes wrong? Because that to me is the biggest question. I don't do it to be pessimistic. I do it because that's how agile we need to be. And if they don't have the agility to be there, they're probably not the right piece.
And challenge is going to pop up, like guaranteed. Yeah. Like, we can absolutely guarantee there's going to be challenges that pop up. You know, we can't really guarantee many other things. I think one other thing we can guarantee is there's going to be changes, you know?
Yeah.
Change happens. And I personally believe that where we are in our time in history right now, that we've got an amplified amount of changes happening simultaneously. And I think that's going to increase, you know, maybe for the next few years, maybe for the next decade, who knows? But I really feel that those who are ready to like move and adapt and shift with the changing environment are the ones that are going to like thrive through this kind of environment. And those who are wanting to do the same things and just stick to what they know, they're probably going to find it pretty challenging.
Very much so. We're exactly on the same page there. We don't say if, it's when, because if you can point to me to a single GP, a single investment company that has exactly executed what they're going and nothing changed from point A to point B, I'd be very surprised. I would give you $5 because it never happens that way. But the ability to be agile and the ability to be honest with people about what's going on, you know, same thing, like whether it's an event or whether it's an investment, we do regular check-ins, right? So we do weekly check-ins with our property management company. We do weekly check-ins internally. We do a monthly check-in of financials on purpose, exactly where we are. We do the same thing. You close an event day. What happened today? What are we going to do tomorrow to adjust to what happened today? Every single day. It could be weather, it could be a change in interest rate. And to me, they're the same monster. It's just in a different place.
Yeah, and it's actually an area that I put a lot of focus on, the economy. I kind of, as a side project, love to take a deep dive on macroeconomics because I think it affects so many of our investments and all the things that are going on right now. And interesting, we look at what happens with banks recently, and we've seen some movements and changes in the multifamily space with a lot of people with adjustable rate mortgages. And they're kind of essentially stuck with a hot potato, some people, not all. And it's not happening all across like the multifamily space. But with all these changes happening right now, like what are you guys doing this year to kind of adapt and change and to kind of like move forward to, you know, navigate through all of this kind of madness?
Sure. I mean, I'd like to say that we're not doing a lot of things differently because I think we just saw it a little bit differently. There was a lot of money that was, to your point, a lot of money was cheap money, right? But a lot of money was cheap money on short terms. We made it a point to, a lot of people say that we do conservative underwriting, right? But for us, we always wanted to be in a place that we had long money on purpose. And it's a tool, right? Like, short-term loans or bridge loans are a decent tool. And I think a lot of people were just expecting that the sky would never fall, right? Like it's always going to be this way, that it's always going to go up. It's never going to change. And to your point, some people got caught with a hot potato. Fortunately, we didn't, and we were smart about asking for money. Like we had some loans, and some of the ones that we took over in that time, we actually assumed some loans. And so we're still in great shape based on what that is. We are paying attention to more creative ways to get into some deals, because as I think everybody is in this space, assumable loans are a great space to be in. We are getting deeper into like owner finance deals and finding some of those, everybody, it's a unicorn of a mom and pop that owns it and wants to owner finance. But I think that the conversation is also open a little bit more. I do think that we're also resetting to be more realistic and more in the reality. The fact that I don't know that we're going to see 3% interest rates ever again, truthfully. You know what I mean? Maybe, but probably not. And people that are waiting and holding on for that hope that we're going to get back there are probably going to be in a little bit of trouble. If it normalizes around 5 or 6, like historically speaking, like that's still not a bad way to be. So to me, it's more of a mindset shift and a conversation shift of what does that look like? What can we buy for this money? What does that look like in our plan as we're putting it together? To your point, like, where does the notebook start now? And what's the difference there? So being in the value add space, what are we doing and what good can we do in this space based on that capital stack and based on that return now? And I think that goes all the way down to the conversations you're having with your investors, right? Money was cheap, which means investments that were made probably had some pretty high returns, or even the promise of some pretty high returns. There were some people, and I'm sure you're the same, people were promising some pretty big numbers. I think having realistic conversations with your investors based on the space, like, hey, this is realistically what we think we can get, even with a conservative margin, and you need to be comfortable with that. And here's why, right? Like if people who want fast money, people who want quick money, people want really big, quick money, you're probably not our guy. You're in this, you're illiquid for 3 to 5 years. And if we need to hold, we may hold for a little bit longer, just based on what we're seeing. So it's more of based on how we form that conversation and how we go about doing the deals than anything else.
Risk-adjusted returns.
Yeah.
And I actually heard you speaking many times throughout this conversation about the forward projections. So many conversations I've had with operators, not just in the multifamily space, but like across the investment board, have been very much of like, hey, right now, this is what's happening right now. But these investments are like 5 years, 7 years, and we need to take into consideration everything that's going to happen between now and then, which is mostly question marks. Like we don't, especially in today's environment, we really don't know. Are you guys looking at are you guys looking at like tax abatement properties and things like this as well?
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I've got some really great partners as well. My brother, Eric, is an engineer. He's a civil. We've got another one who's an engineer and who's based in the oil space. Our fourth partner is actually a salesman of kombucha. So we've got some really interesting different takes in that. And we have looked at some of those things, and we will continue to do that. I think as the evolution of our company and as where we go with people's money and our own money, frankly, is going to change. I do think that this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as syndication is concerned. I think that, a big focus area we talked at the beginning is letting people know that this exists, and it could be a really powerful and useful tool. I do think that we'll see people fall out of this game a little bit. And I think we're, to your point, like it's still in the infancy, but I think there's some people who got in when it was a little bit easier and it was cheaper to get in this space. I think the cream will rise to the top. So we're playing the long game. I think we're confident in our skills. We're confident this is a space that we can do some good in as well. Like, getting into that BC class, into some workforce housing, elevating the way that people live, making a little bit of money for everybody, but also providing a quality product for people to live. Like that's something that we can be proud of also.
I was just at our best ever conference in Salt Lake City. And I noticed because I've got a lot of these conferences, and I noticed a few things that were really different about this time. And first thing, tons of talk about the economy. I think somewhere between 30 to 50% of the speakers were talking about the economy, and every one of the participants was talking about the economy. That, from my experience, doesn't happen people usually talking about strategies and all this kind of stuff. So that was interesting to see masses being like, oh, we need to like start thinking about this stuff. Secondarily, I also noticed that there was a lot of people that were for the first time saying, hey, we need to branch outside of what we're actually doing right now. And there was a lot of talk about alternative investments, which was pretty interesting. Even some not even alternative real estate investments, completely like, you know, food production and different things like this, where people are just seeing a lot of like differences and changes and everything like that. And I think this is interesting because that's, you know, because I've been like screaming from the rooftops about all these kinds of things for years and years.
Yeah.
This is the first time that I'm really feeling that like everybody else is feeling it, like really actually viscerally feeling it and starting to make some changes and adaptions and everything like that.
Heck yeah.
I think it's pretty exciting, you know, because there's going to be a lot of problems to solve and a lot of like new ways to create solutions. And I think that's great.
And I do think that you put the right people in the right place in the calm manner. It's exciting to be able to solve those problems, right? And the ability to see it from the other side. And I am excited about that. I think for us, though, it's just a longer view of people can get in so wrapped up into what's new. And, oh, I heard about this on this podcast. Like, I'm going to put my money there without it really understanding it or really like making a plan for it. And I think that's where people get involved. Like you can say that about the meme stocks, right? Like somebody on this podcast definitely invested in GameStop at the wrong time and definitely lost some money, right? Like there's a lot of that, but it's more about if you as an investor, and this is just me personally talking, I'm not an advisor, but if you as an investor understanding what you're getting into and asking questions why, and if it fits what you're going for, it doesn't have to be the coolest, shiniest thing. It just has to fit what you're doing. And I think that's the questions that we ask people are like, what's your goal? Like, and again, it goes back to like meeting you where you are. What's your goal? Like, what are you into? What's exciting to you? What are you going to pay attention to? Do you want to pay attention to that? And so it's, I think the same way. I think there's some really interesting things out there, and I've had the opportunity to invest in some interesting spaces. But for us right now, our focus is like, we're going to keep making sure that people have a quality place to live in the place we invest in.
Yeah, man. And what you were just saying then was kind of triggering a thought pattern of that you're basically saying that for each investor, there's no one size fits all. It's like, what are you looking for? Where are you at? What are your resources? What are you looking to achieve? Everybody's different. It's kind of a general theme that I think is happening with people on the planet right now with like health. Like there's a lot of, there used to be like the one size fits all workout program or diet. And everyone knows that this doesn't work like that. People have different builds. We have different bodies. We have different metabolisms. We have different lifestyles. And like, so it's kind of where I think we're really moving into like more consciousness and being able to do what we really want to do, what really works for us, and what's really good and important for us in our life. And I know before you were talking about time freedom, and I think that's a really big piece. So to be the living example of really leaning into time freedom, how is that actually playing a role in your life? And like, what are you doing to really express your time freedom?
Oh man. I mean, and it's something I aspire to so much. And I think that the ultimate goal is to have, all time freedom. But for me, being able to spend time with my boys and teach them the things that are important to me. We were talking offline. I got to spend a bunch of time with my boys in the mountains, and we ski, and I get to take them down and hang out with my parents. Where I grew up, I was really fortunate to grow up in Southwest Colorado. We had access to the lake, we had access to outside, we had access to skiing. Those are things that I still hold near and dear to me. But it's more than that. It's just about being around. When I was on the road, I loved what I was doing. I loved the projects. I loved the intensity, but I was also missing the 4th of July. We produced a race in Brooklyn that spanned over the 4th of July. And I spent the 4th of July watching fireworks over, the Hudson, as opposed to watching them in the mountains with my boys. And it's a decision that I make now to do that. I was the coach of my son's flag football team. And that was something that would never been able to happen. Even just going to spring break. Like I couldn't guarantee you that I would be here for spring break next year if some project came up that we were going to go do. I can't tell my wife even a year out. Like I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be here. And now I can say, yes, we build our life around those rocks as opposed to building around what I was doing. And that to me is like the biggest first step. It's like, how can I be here? How can I show up and then build my life around those rocks? That I'm for sure going to be in Durango, Colorado on the second to the last week of March. I'm definitely going to bring my boys, and we're definitely going to ski, whether there's snow or not. Same thing in the fall time. Last fall, I'm definitely going to go to Oregon, and we're going to in the fall time, and it's going to be rainy, and it's going to be amazing. And we're going to run around and find hermit crabs and all those things, and just show my boys the things that I love, but also let them fall in love with those things on their own. So I think I get kind of teared up about it. Like I get choked up, like the ability to let them have time with me, and I get to see what they're falling in love with.
And do you, in that environment, do you find it challenging, or do you have some kind of code to make it possible for you to have a different context where so many people will do that kind of thing? They'll go like, all right, I'm going to go snowboarding with my kids, but then they're like on the ski lift working, and they're like on their phone and doing all that kind of stuff and not actually present. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. How do you like get around that side of things because there's always things ticking in the background?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of that is it's a time block type of situations, like letting people know, and we all do it, right? Like I'm by no means am I perfect. Like there's some days where you get a phone call and you have to like, hey guys, take 2 seconds, we're gonna do this, but making sure that they know why you're doing that and making sure that you know that you're there with them. I've had that conversation, and it happened recently. It was like something went wrong, we're fixing it, and it's something that was immediate. It's like, hey, I know this is going on, we've got to deal with the situation right now. It's like, guys, I know this is our time, I really appreciate it, but this is why we're here. And then tonight we're gonna add an extra day, or we're gonna add another thing on here. So it's more about being very real with them, in my opinion, and using enough time where they understand why this is, because it's like it's a treat. Maybe take a step back. I explain it this way: if it's always flowing together, if I'm there and I'm present at dinner, and I'm there and I'm present at their football game, and I'm there and I'm present when we're skiing, and we go and we make plans like, hey, we're going to ski this weekend, and we're going to get up at 5 a.m, and we're going to walk uphill, and we're going to see, like, I love to skin, I got you snowshoes, you're going to walk with that, and we're going to share some of these things together, as opposed to like I'm not present and then all of a sudden like I'm present for 4 days. Even if I'm all present just for those 4 days, it doesn't, in the aggregate, like it's that special moment, right? But it doesn't necessarily add up. To me, it's about being like, what is your overall presence as well?
That's huge, man. There's so many distractions these days. That's
easy
within itself, man.
It's easy.
Yeah. So so you are the living example of expressing time freedom. You like to do that with your family and enjoying outdoor adventures and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I know you and I were talking offline about a really, really exciting event. I don't know if we can even talk about it because it's so early in the stages, but I was getting really juiced on the concept of an event that you're going to be hosting, or events that you're going to be hosting. Would it be all right if we uncovered that a little bit here? Yeah,
we can give a teaser. So yeah, we've been working on some event series around really kind of how my brain and my journey have come together. You know, like I said, and I mentioned that I'm a doer. I learned by doing. My brain is not naturally mathematically inclined. You know, that's why I have my brother and 2 engineers on our team. Like they underwrite and can do it in their sleep faster than I can do it on paper. But what I love doing is being with people and understanding how people work, and meeting people where they are is important. So when I got into real estate, I found some people that I jived with and could learn from and could ask questions of. So we're building some event series. One will start in Denver. The first one will be in October in Denver, called the Headwaters Project. And essentially it's about people who are getting into this or have already made some steps down the road, pairing them up with some people that have been in the industry for a long time, but less about talking heads on a stage and much more about real interaction for a couple of days. You know, we do tons of breakouts. We cap it on purpose at about 60 people. So we sell out quick. But on purpose. So we have, you know, in that we'll break down, 10 different groups of 6 people, or 6 different groups of 10 people. And some people do underwriting, some people do asset management, some people just do business development, and some will be open forum. And then you move those people around. So by the time you get done with a couple of days, your brain's swimming, but also likely you've met some people that you're going to partner with, that you can ask questions of, that will be your mentor. So that's the step one. What we're talking about beyond that is really developing what I want to, loosely want to call the Delta, is based around adventure. Because I think for me, I learned so much more by doing, but I also in my own environment. So we're building a series around development while adventuring. So whether it be riding motorbikes for 4 days, and you ride for the first part of the day and you show up and we have a chef that's prepared you food, and you sit down, you have a drink, you spend a couple hours masterminding and learning and talking and digging in and uncovering your own strengths and your own weaknesses. for a couple of days, or we've got a hut and we're skinning for a couple of days and we come back and we're around a fire and we have a whiskey and we're like getting into it. So what we want to do is pair people's adventure spirit and entrepreneurial spirit at the same time, and really give them the resources, the tools, and the people and the mentors to succeed.
And I think, I mean, not only is that an absolutely amazing idea, and I'm very interested because I love all these outdoor adventures and it just sounds absolutely amazing. For us in our lives to carve out the time to ask these kinds of questions and do these kinds of work. And like, unless we're going to go do something like this intentionally, where we're going to block out this time and say, all right, yeah, we're going to have some fun and we're going to play, but we're also going to like ask these real questions and take a deep dive and uncover some things that we've been neglecting, or maybe didn't even know that we're under the covers, so to speak. That's really important, man. Like if we don't stop to intercept those things, people can go through their whole life without asking these questions, without like, you know, taking a deep dive in these areas, and then we don't get the breakthrough. And some of those moments in my life have been the most radically changing, powerful moments, but we got to stop. We're going to like actually take the time to do that. And I think that's really special to actually hold space for people to have those breakthroughs, man.
I mean, you and I have had this conversation. I think we were talking in Nashville about surfing, and it's the same thing for me, like being in mountains. I can remember very specific times where you have to get quiet enough to be able to hear what you're talking about inside your own head, like getting amongst it, like just dropping everything else off. So part of this is what I want to do is take a Pelican case. You lock your phone away when you're on your motorcycle. For the vast majority of the day, you don't even have access to your phone, right? Like we have all the things that you need to be present. Like there's a chase truck, there's somebody preparing your meal. Your job is to take yourself and your motorcycle from point A to point B and wrestle with all that stuff in your brain while you're riding. And then when we get there, unlock that and have a conversation. Same thing. We're going to go skinning. There's no phones. There's nothing else. Like it's going to be you, a couple of guys or girls in the mountains and breathing and skiing. And then at the end of the day, all that stuff you've uncovered in your brain, we're going to sort that out and we're going to help you succeed and give you some of the tools. But a lot of times people know inherently a lot of what they're going through. It's just the world's way too noisy to be able to listen to it. So we want to build some space for you to get out there, get amongst it, and be able to listen to yourself a little bit too.
Listen to yourself, man. Yeah, that's powerful, dude. I think we have the answers. If we stop and ask ourselves the right questions, that we know, we can get in tune with ourselves. That's beautiful, man. Something that I've actually kind of got into recently, and I'm very, very early stages of this, but I'm really excited about the whole concept of it all, because it's something, you know, when you come across something that you're like, wow, I never thought like this was something I was going to be into. And so I've always, for the last however many years, been training for like a Spartan race or a marathon or a triathlon or something like that, some kind of athletic goal. But the goal isn't actually the whole thing. It's actually, it keeps the context of my training. Now I'm motivated to work towards this thing, and I'm going to keep going, and it keeps me active, right? And I've found that when I don't have those goals in place and I don't have a race coming up and I don't have a challenge coming up, I'm not going to train as hard. For some reason, I've kind of dropped off like that. And then for some reason, I came across mountaineering recently. I'm actually going out to Mount Baker in Washington to do a 6-day mountaineering course. And that's actually going to lead me to Kilimanjaro in Africa, so I can actually get some altitude and really acclimatize myself there, so I can go down to South America and I can climb Aconcagua, which is the tallest mountain in the Americas. And then I can, after that, go down to Antarctica, to Vincent, to climb the tallest mountain in the Antarctic, and then go over and do one of the tallest mountains in Tibet as well. And I'm just really, really freaking excited about this thing. It's like, I don't know if the universe designed it so that I needed to mature myself to a certain point where like, now's the time for me to do it. But yeah, man, I'm just like, it's just that adventure side of things. It brings so much into my life. Now I'm like really amped about training. Now I'm really amped to get connected with all of these mountains. It's kind of like a spiritual thing for me, as well as like a physical and mental, and very much the adventure and the unknown and the exploration. And I just really want to share that because I'm super excited about it. And I think it applies to like definitely your energy and a lot of what you're creating. And I know you can kind of like resonate with me on that.
Very much so. Yeah. No, and you and I have talked about that a bunch, is that the training for a purpose and and honestly, it's the same way. Like for a long time, I was a kind of a stick and ball athlete in my early days, and it changed quite a bit when I realized like I'm not going to be a football player. Like I'm not fast enough, strong enough, and I've had too many injuries. And so changed everything to focusing on skiing all the time. In my college career, I probably had more days on the mountain than I did in class, if I'm being completely honest, in the winter months. But it changed the way that I thought about things, and especially getting a little bit older and being with my kids. My goal is like, I'm going to play with myself and my kids as long as I possibly can. I want to be physically strong enough to be active for as many days in my life as I possibly can be. And what that means and how you train, right? Like you talk about, like, same thing. Like I'm never going to be the best climber. My strength to weight ratio is never going to be enough to be able to be the best, like boulder, the best climber. But man, do I love doing it. And I love climbing with those kids. And so my goal is to be the best possible climber that I can be, and be around and to teach those kids. Same thing. Like I'm teaching these kids to ski. I'm going to be the best possible skier. I'm going to be strong enough to push all day long as they come through with me.
I'll tell you what, man, part of my training that I've actually just figured out in the last couple of weeks is that I want to go to Colorado, because you guys have like a bunch of 14ers out there, some 15,000 feet peaks. And I've found some cool areas to hang out in Colorado, where I'm getting a lot of elevation to actually acclimatize for a couple of weeks before I go to somewhere like Kilimanjaro or Aconcagua. And if the stars and moon align and we can actually make it line up, it'd be cool to climb a 14 together, man, out there.
Heck yeah, dude. Let's do it. And let's not talk about it. Let's put it on the calendar. I'll meet you there. That's part of the time freedom, man. Let's put that rock in the river.
Beautiful, man. And if the young fellas are like up or physically capable of doing it or whatever, then yeah, let's bring them.
Well, there's a couple 14ers they can make for sure.
Yeah. Beautiful. Good stuff. So what would you say over the next 12 months, what's got you most excited?
Learning, and honestly, learning with people. We're in a very, very interesting time, as we talked about, and a transition, not only as an economy, but as a nation and as a world. There's a lot that's going on. And I think looking at it at a longer view and a longer lens, it can be really crushing in a lot of ways to see that there's some changes for the negative in the very near term. Looking at it with a long lens, unfortunately, there's been a lot of major negatives in the long term, but also, like, I see it from a lens that things get better, as when things get worse, things get better, and people that rise to the top that make those things better. So learning about like how we can help make things better, how we can help people's lives better, how we can meet people where they are. Like we can talk about that. So it's not just investing. It's like, hey, how can we build relationships with people, even if they're not investing with us, if they're not adventuring with us, how can we make their lives better? So learning amongst other people has me jazzed. I think we're going to look back at this time in 5 to 10 years. I mean, like that's where it started, like because of this duress, because of this hardship, or because of this thing that happened, that allowed us to be where we are now.
Yeah, man. Learning is huge. And talking about learning and kids, you got kids. I don't have kids, but I think about the concept of if I did have kids. And I mean, I think our kids in this generation should be learning about building relationships. They should learn how to manage money. They should learn how to like handle their emotions and process emotions, and how to like make critical decisions. And like these things are seemingly like they're not the academic things that we really like learn at school. And I don't know, maybe schools are starting to teach these things, but I think a lot of parents will be like waking up in these years and the times now. It's like it's like things are being stirred up, and I think that we're going to see those kinds of changes. That maybe 10 years from now we'll have schools like that, or homeschool franchises or something like that, where kids are learning a lot of these things. Because I look at it and I just think kids are graduating at grade 12 right now with probably grade 7 intelligence.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if the intelligence, I don't even know. I would say wisdom is probably a better word to actually use there. But I think that like our humans have way more potential than what our schooling systems are actually like putting out there. And if we put our kids in the right environment where they actually do these things, they're working on relationships and communication and emotions and all the rest of it, and still the math and English and all of that stuff as well, dude, unlimited potential.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's something missing too. I mean, we can walk this road a long ways, but what I'm excited about too is that, in certain cases, vocational training and vocational teaching is coming back, at least in America, and at least what I've seen in the conversations I've had. And it's not so looked down upon. And I think that's a huge miss. There's a story that I tell. My wife comes from a completely different environment than I do. I met my wife in New York City when I just started producing. I moved to New York to produce fashion shows because it was the furthest thing from anything that I ever knew. And I wanted to put myself in the most uncomfortable environment just to see if I could make it, right? To see if I had the chops to actually produce. And I met my wife, my now wife, there, and she's a New Yorker. She's been there her whole life. Her family's from there. Her dad's from there. And so we have a different fundamental difference in how we see child rearing in the beginning. And so I grew up, my dad was a farmer's son. My mom was a rancher's daughter, and kids were a part of that environment, right? Like, so my kids now are 8 and 9. Not so very long ago, those kids would be like running a farm. They would be driving tractors. They would be doing things, and they would be doing dangerous things. So I agree with you. The ability to have emotional intelligence, the ability to have communication skills, the ability to understand what you're doing, but actually have a vocational ability as well to understand the why behind some of these things, I think is incredibly important as well.
And when you say vocation, are you talking also about like, blue collar trades and things like this as well? Or
yeah, I think there's a lot of, I think that things are missed when we don't realize why things work. Like there's a lot of interesting data that comes out of, this blue collar versus white collar. I think, I know, obviously I use my brain more than I use my hands at this point, but at the same time, like I was raised to know how things work, like how we build things, like how do I pick up a tool? We still, I have a shop at my house on purpose. I know that you are a welder. The ability to understand why things work, whether or not you're the one building them, whether or not you're the one that's running that machine, understanding why that machine works, whether it's the economy or whether it's a truck is important to me. I think there are far too many kids, and I know we're on a tangent here, but I think this is really important when we talk about the way the world works and what we're excited about in the next 10 years. I do think that there is a return for a lot of kids who aspire to be in the vocational trades. And I think there's a lot of really good that comes from that, because there's a lot of reason for people that can grow and can A, make a bunch of money, but B, do a lot of good in this world in that space.
Yeah, man. And I'm here mainly on my soapbox, helping people and talking about like creating freedom and being an entrepreneur and investing in things like that. And I know that even though that's the main thing that I'm promoting, that there's a lot of people that are listening that, like you said before, they don't want to be the business owner or the full-time investor. They actually do like what they're doing, or maybe they want to have a job. And one thing, and I know we're kind of going down a few rabbit holes here, but to talk about like the blue collar trades. So kind of now and definitely over the last like 20 years, that generation would say, well, you be a doctor or an attorney, and that's how you make a lot of money, right? You go to university and you do that. I think the blue collar trades, we're seeing a massive, massive shift, because a lot of things still need to be built. We still need our tradesmen, but all of the baby boomers are retiring and there's hardly anybody coming in to replace them. And so we're starting to see the early parts of that in multifamily and mobile home parks and our investments that contractors are harder to get. They're charging more, they're booked out further. I'm just saying, could be an opportunity for a lot of people to like get into that space, which could be very, very profitable moving forward. Maybe being a welder and a plumber or a carpenter might be the future attorney and doctor, really, with the way that things are changing and where they're going, because everybody kind of like wants to work on a computer, and there's this whole industry that needs to happen. Otherwise, we don't have all of these resources, right?
Well, not only that, it can be incredibly lucrative. It is a business, right? And I think that there's some, and again, a little caveat here. I think the hardest part is that no matter what you go through for training, whether you're being a doctor or a lawyer, a carpenter, a welder, if you're going to run a business, very few times, and what we're talking about, like in this next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, teaching people and teaching children how to be a business person and not just a tradesman, right? Like I forget what I was reading the other day, but there was somebody who was talking about, like, he was a chiropractor. He went all the way through chiropractor school, was an excellent chiropractic doctor, and failed miserably because nobody taught him how to run a business, right? Like, that's the thing. If you're a carpenter and you can run a great business, then you're in the money, especially now. Like, go move to Crested Butte, move to Vail, move to Aspen. Like, I promise you, as a skilled businessman and still skilled tradesman, you're going to do all right for yourself. And you're seeing that across the board. But if we can teach people how to be business people, as well as tradesmen or doctors, lawyers, attorneys. Sure. But if you go into the trade and you are an apprentice and you move up, your student loans are probably dramatically less, right, the time you put in there than somebody who's a doctor, and you have the ability to do some good. Everybody has their own path. I'm not necessarily saying one's better than the other, but I'm just excited by the fact that it's going, in my opinion, it's going to be needed, and it's going to be completely acceptable for somebody like, I want to learn to build houses, and I want to be a great businessman, and I want to go do a good job. Like, right on, son, get it done, man.
And arguably, the learning of the business piece is significantly easier than learning the craft and the skill of actually being a carpenter or a welder and all of those things too,
Yep.
because they're kind of transferable fundamental basics in business of marketing, management, bookkeeping, and all of these kinds of things. Yeah.
Build your system. Yep.
Very cool, man. So you were saying learning. I do want to just like give a little bit more energy to that. You were kind of referring to like learning by having conversations and things like that. Is there anything specific that you'd be doing to like continue to learn over the next 12 months? Is it conversations with people, or like?
It is conversation with people. And a lot of it, I think for us, personally speaking, on a business front, I'm really interested in learning and growing our marketing side of things, and learning and growing how we reach people. Because like I said, our ultimate goal is to get into people's lives and help where we can, not necessarily to force our way in there, but to let people know that there's so many resources that I, in my opinion, don't exist. So learning about how we do that and how we do that effectively, how we do that realistically, and speak from the heart, as opposed to, bombarding people with messaging on Instagram. Like, it's all a part of it, but how, for me, coming out of action sports and transitioning into real estate was really hard. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes it still is, because I'm me. And so finding my voice, and you and I've had this conversation, it's like, how do I naturally transition this? And how do I have a conversation with people and be authentically me and not be an imposter, right? Like that was a really difficult transition. And I mean, a part of it too is, I'm partners with my younger brother, and he's 2 or 3 steps ahead. Like, he was the one who's like, hey, we should come over here and do this. So even getting through that and having a conversation with my brother and being a business partner, and him being the leader for the first time in like our physical relationship, and as as siblings, was really interesting. But learning about how do we tell these stories authentically, and how do we meet people where they are? It's the best way to describe it. And say, hey, I know that you're a doctor. I know that you're a tradesman. I know that you're a welder. We can help you, or we for sure know somebody who can if we can't.
Beautiful. That's awesome. A connector and a true person who really wants to help people. Love that, man. When you make it about other people, it's like business just becomes like easy, doesn't it? When it's no longer about us. Like, on my path to financial freedom, I was egocentric, dude. It was all about me. It was all about getting to the point of like becoming financially free. Then once I achieved that, my life just changed. And it was like, wait up, I don't have these like pressures. I don't have these forces. I don't have to beat against the clock. And then I actually changed it, and I made it more about our investors, their outcome, their families, all of the things that are going to be a consequential effect of that. And it's actually easier. It's actually easier to show up for other people sometimes than what it is to actually show up for ourselves. And I know you're massive in that area.
Well, there's more. I think that people are incredibly short-sighted when it comes to the fact that it's just mine. This is mine. I've got to have elbows out. I think I told somebody the other day, the person who eats with their elbows out the table soon is eating alone, right? There's so much here for everybody, and there's a way for us to help everybody. And at the end of the day, I truly think that even in a business front, if you can say, hey, this isn't my lane. You want mobile home parks? Go speak to Bryce. You do right by that investor. I have built a friend and an ally for life, not only with you, but with that investor. And that goes a long way. And that person's going to talk about both of us. And that exponentiates what we're doing. If I just hold that person close to me, and whether I do right by them or not, hopefully I do, maybe that exponentiates here, but that's taking down literally half of that realm, because I would be willing to bet I send you somebody and say, hey, this is my buddy Bill. He's super interested in the mobile home space. Cool. I'd be willing to bet that if somebody came to you and didn't fit what you're doing, but it fit what I was doing, you would call me. And that's how we grow together, man. There's just so much here for everybody. It was the same way in the event space. Like, some people had their elbows out, and there's this huge transition. Like, a lot of my very good friends that were all a part of different companies are now suddenly collaborating. And this Voltron that they're building, they can take down amazing projects and do amazing things that they would never have been able to do on their own in their own separate pieces. The more we grow together, man, the more amazing things we're going to be able to do. And that goes for economics, that goes for almost everything, governance, down to your local community PTA.
And I think that even the most egocentric person that will click in the investment world after time, because the deeper I go down this rabbit hole, man, there is so many ways to make money, dude. Like there's no way we can keep up with it all. There's no way we can do it all. It's like, I mean, there's just so many deals and opportunities and ways to solve problems and make money out there that we honestly live in a world of abundance. And even if you and I were doing exactly the same deals, we would likely find a way to collaborate on that anyway, because there's just so many deals. There's only so much time in a day. And we really, really, truly live in a world of abundance. And this whole world of investing, and I didn't know this because I was in the welding world and the construction world and everything like that. It's like there's just so much there. It's amazing. And it's like, whoa, wake up, guys. Like there's an absolutely massive world over here where you can just live in abundance and you're not stepping on other people's toes. You're not taking from other people. You're not making other people poor. If anything, I think in this realm, we're actually taking a little bit of money from like the wealthy, and as opposed to the other way around, because we're actually providing jobs, we're providing employments, opportunities, better housing, all these kinds of things. It's just really exciting. And I don't know, I kind of like get on a little bit of a side tangent there, but
I couldn't agree with you more.
Is just maybe they don't see that the way that we do, you know?
No, but I think it also takes seeing it and people who are willing to step into this space. And I think this is why your platform is so powerful, and why I'm honestly so honored to be able to have this conversation with you on this platform, is because the more that people can hear it and the more that people see it, it's really hard to see if you're not looking for it, right? That's that reticular activating cortex. If you're looking for a red car, you see red cars everywhere, right? But you didn't see all those red cars, the same amount of red cars on your drive to and from work every single day, but all of a sudden you're paying attention to it. If you can start listening to these types of conversations and understand there's more out there than any of us that are listening to this or talking on this can grab. There's literally more out there. There are more deals that will exist in the next 10 years than you and I can do together by an exponent.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. So the people like, I can't do it. I have just this much. I've got to have the tight fist. You're missing so much by seeing that. If you take a minute and like take a step back, like really start asking questions, ask as many people in your world as you possibly can and start learning about the space. You'll realize pretty quickly how big that water is, how deep that water is.
Absolutely, man. So I've really, really appreciated having you here on Freedom Hack Radio today. I know we're kind of coming up on time, so we're gonna have to wrap things up here. How do our freedom hackers keep the conversation going with you?
Yes, sir. I'm active on LinkedIn. Ben Nelson 303, same thing on Instagram, Ben Nelson 303. Please reach out to me at ben@wildoakcapital.com. And if you're interested in the events in this series, you want to go adventuring, give us a holler and we'll set you up.
Beautiful. So Ben, thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for being real. Thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks for being exciting and adventurous and being a leading example. I actually would really love to continue this conversation and have you back in the not too long distant future. So you're totally welcome back anytime, brother.
I'd be honored.
And between now and then, is there anything that you want to leave with our freedom hackers? Maybe a little golden nugget or piece of advice?
Get amongst it. Get quiet. Get quiet and get amongst it. You know more than I think you know, and ask the right questions and find the right people. That's it.
Beautiful. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today with us, brother. For all of our freedom hackers out there, I'm Bryce Robertson, your host. Until next week, live large and live free. G'day, this is Bryce Robertson. I'm your host here at Freedom Hack Radio, and I truly, truly hope that you got a ton of value out of the episode that we just shared with you. And if you did, make sure to subscribe on your YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcasting platform. Hit the notification button so you can find out about the next episodes as they come out. Because if you haven't achieved financial time and location freedom, you really need to be dialed in here. So make sure to subscribe and follow us along as you grow on your path to financial, time, and location freedom here at Freedom Hack Radio.